What you're talking about is actually a cliche that we hear our whole lives, but then we kind of realize that this is really true. We have to kind of love ourselves. I was saying when I started with my students, I started with the baby sigh. But after a while, I started to realize that that was too advanced because for two things. First of all, I was working with people who were typically shy and timid of their own voices. And and the act of actually making a sound wasn't always happening in the way that we're talking, that light touch, light awareness kind of thing. So I realized I actually need to take a step back before making a sound. And that's where I created the integrated breath. It's about being aware of the breath coming into the body very naturally. So the first thing is to let go of control, right? And the exercise actually begins first becoming aware of where the body is in the breathing cycle. And then when it's ready to take a breath in, that's when the exercise begins. So it's an exercise in awareness and letting go of control. And then that light touch of the mind as the breath comes into the body. And then sitting there very patiently and watching and waiting for the rib cage to relax and feeling the breath begin to flow out of the body just because of that relaxation. So there's no control, right? So as the breath starts to leave the body, that's when we can begin our hum, right? But before I could teach people the humming part, I had to teach them the breathing part. That's how students teach a teacher, because they demonstrate a need, and then you're trying to figure out how to resolve that, how to help them. And so you try something and you try something else and you try something else until you find something that helps, right? And then you develop that into something. So it became the integrated breath, which is the first exercise I teach to everyone or taught to everyone. We just want to sort of feel that sensation very lightly of the breath coming in. And then we want to sit there and watch as our body turns to, the cycle turns and the breath starts to leave, right? And then I incorporated hands because it's a silent thing. I started by doing hands up as we breathed in, but what I found was that encouraged people to breathe up into their shoulders, up into their chest. I found that that was creating a problem, so I started doing the motion of taking the hands down as we breathe in, and then once the breath has started to turn, there's that moment where you're waiting for it to turn, and then when it's starting to trickle out, then we move the hands apart, right? So that is the integrated breath. And when I'm doing it right, when I'm finished it, I sort of feel this little tiny light sensation through my body, like a release of tension or just the beauty of the breath. I don't know what it is, but it's almost like this feeling of light traveling. Yeah. We're busy human beings running around, and our mind is, I don't know about you, but my mind is always racing with 1,000 things. So to actually sit down and go through this, it might take me 2 or 3 times to get everything settled and to that point where I do feel that whatever it is that travels when I'm calm, when I'm centered, and when it's all working. The goal of the integrated breath and the baby sigh is to show you that it's possible to sing without all that extra stuff that we tend to put in. At least, from my view as a shy singer, we have two maybe three things with singing. One is just understanding how to work with the body, in this way that we're talking about, and understanding that that's enough, that it doesn't have to be more. Our second issue is actually opening, like surrendering to the breath, allowing the voice to be, not holding it back, that kind of thing. And then the third thing is actually learning a little bit about what the voice needs from us other than breath, which is shape, legato, and those things that are actually going to help it operate a little bit better. You may do it on a daily basis, and you probably do, make some progress, but typically we do it for a while and maybe we feel like that's all there is, and then one day it shifts and we can do it a little bit longer, or do the yoga pose a little bit more advanced, or we can run another extra block or whatever it is. Something shifts, and the only reason it shifts is because we have been deliberately engaging with it on a consistent basis. So when I first started singing, and even when I first started teaching, I don't think I really had that calmness that we're talking about. I was terrified of teaching. I was terrified of people. But at the same time, I wanted to try to help, and I wanted to see if I could help. So going into my first group class, which I called Women's Voices, I had to really think about how I was going to approach this. So I took the integrated breath, which I did with them, and then I brought that into a grounding meditation. And then I brought that into another meditation. And then in that meditation, we would add the humming. What was really interesting to me was before that, I was a bit of a skeptic about things like, yin and yang and all that kind of stuff. But as I was sitting there talking them through the meditation and talking to them, about bringing the energy of the sky or the universe into your head, letting it mingle in your body, then bringing the energy from the earth and letting it mingle together, and then having that release, I could literally feel the energy moving in the room. Okay, this is not just, some esoteric abstract thing. This actually happens. And I think I sort of knew it on an intuitive level because I was very super sensitive as a child and felt energies off of other people. But nobody ever talked about it or acknowledged it. So I was like a Betazoid from Star Trek. I didn't know what to do with all these feelings, and sometimes I didn't know whether they were mine or theirs. But when I started teaching, then I discovered that that is actually a very good thing to have. Practitioners like you and I, we have that sort of intuitive connection to somebody else's energy because it's how we're going to kind of relate to them. And when they trust you and they give that to you, give their energy to you, it's an amazing feeling. You feel so honored by that. Some people just, the act of breathing will make them break down. Something about that just touches a part of them that perhaps has been hidden. Or for others, it's the making of the sound. Open something that they had closed, So it's a beautiful, it's sort of bittersweet beauty in a sense, because part of you realizes that you could always do this, but you were so scared or frightened or intimidated or oppressed or whatever it is that you didn't. And that awakening to that, there's always a little bit of grief in that because I didn't do it before, but there's joy because I'm doing it now. There's never any judgment in that. It's not, I'm not sitting here going, well, it took you 20 years to do that. It's more like this is your time. This is why you're here. You came here for this. You intuitively knew that you needed this and you were looking for something to help you find it. And even though, it's an Italian method called bel canto and whatever, in that technique, the fundamental belief is that the voice is already within you, and it's the teacher's job
Mm-hmm.
to help you find it. And that could be like peeling layers of an onion, right? It
Mm-hmm.
certainly was for me. I had no idea when I started voice lessons that I was going to end up being less shy and teaching other people, other shy people, how to find that path themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
I, I had no idea. It was just something I knew since I was a little girl that I wanted to be a singer, and I shut all that down. When I got into my 20s, it was just like, no, that's just a pipe dream. There's no way you can do that. You're not good enough. And everything in my life was about you're not good enough to do that, right? So when I started the voice lessons, and it took me a while to wake up. I'm talking years, because when you're that wounded and that sort of broken in a sense, your first step is to even become aware of that. And then music really helped, because I love music. And the fact that I was in the music was really important to me. So in my moment of soul searching, when I felt like I'd reached rock bottom, I decided two things. I wanted to do something more creative for work, and I wanted to, sing. I worked on that for a few years and stuff, and I was already teaching, and I started to do the artist way with a friend of mine. And it came to some exercise in the book, and I really had a problem with it. It was causing me a lot of issues. And then when I looked at it and I looked at my dream of singing, I realized that my dream of singing, part of it was based on the bullying that I had experienced in high school. And so the goal of singing was to get on stage, become famous, and say, "See, I'm better than all of you," kind of thing. And I realized that that's a negative. I looked at that and I looked at that and I said, "Okay, what do I really truly want this person now, not the former?" And I realized I simply want to be in the music. I mean, I want to play it, I want to write it, I want to vibrate with it, I want to create it. And that's my goal, whether anybody else is aware of it or not. It's all a process, right? What you're talking about is actually a cliche that we hear our whole lives, but then we kind of realize that this is really true. We have to kind of love ourselves.
Wow.
Females tend to be socialized in our North America society, at least, that it's about everyone else, right? It's about caring for everyone else. I mean, I think that's wonderful as human beings to have compassion and take care of other people, but often we neglect ourselves in that process, because it's easier in a way. It's hard to look at yourself, but to come to that place where you look at yourself and you see your foibles and the things that you want to work on, but you also see when you're 60 something, you've got a lot of life experience. When I think about all the things that I've done, all the places I worked, all the places I've gone, all the people I've known, it's a big history in there. And sometimes now I don't even remember some of it, because it's just so benign and, and banal too. I think that this never ends. This is a journey, that never ends. So learning about ourselves, there's still another layer to pull off, and more things to learn about yourself. And one of the things that I've noticed about myself more recently is that I seem to be more diplomatic. I always think of myself as being very shy and someone who doesn't speak up and stuff. When I think something should be a certain way and it's not, I can be a little obstinate. I've noticed that I somewhat have let that go. And I think
Mm.
this started because I did a group chat for a while. And we would just, and this was during COVID, so it was a way to virtually get together and kind of talk about how people were feeling. I would come in maybe with a quote from somebody, and that would start the discussion. And what was really interesting to me was to see how, I mean, these were people from different places in the world, to see how their they had a different perspective because of their own life experience, and how much you could learn from that and how much we could find that was connected to each other. Somehow it came up that somebody was talking about their personal beliefs, and 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 I thought, somebody else spoke up and said, well, I don't believe the same thing as you. And I started to go, is this going to get, and it was such a beautiful moment because they said to each other, that's okay,
Mhm.
you know, that's all right. You
Mm.
believe what you believe. And there was no fight, oh no, you got to believe what I believe, kind of thing. And that was just such a beautiful moment. I still remember it years later, that people can actually do that.
Mm.
So when we talk about these things, that how we kind of take the external oppression or tension or whatever it is, and we then we take it in to ourselves, and then that affects our breath, and that affects our voice, right? Affects us. Are we able to find that place of calm? Are we able to take that place of calm and then speak our truth to someone else? And I've always believed that. I don't think people should be free to think and do and say whatever works for them as long as they're not hurting somebody else. So imagine a world where everyone was doing that. It would just be a really different place. And we shouldn't put so many people up on pedestals or whatever it is.
Mm.
And governance should be more about collaboration and cooperation and understanding than, power. But unfortunately, it's not. Not yet, anyway. I watch a lot of YouTubes, and one of the things that I have been watching a little bit over the last year is people who do pilgrimages. And one of the ones that a lot of people do is the Camino in Spain, where
Mm.
they walk to Santiago. And it could just be because they are challenged by the walk, or they want a spiritual experience, or whatever it is. But what's really interesting is that a lot of them say, you whatever you put in your pack, you're going to carry your fears and your doubts with you. And then that moment in meditation or in a singing lesson or on stage or whatever it is, you're going to always carry your fears with you unless you become aware of them and work on them, right?